Ahoy there, jabronis. Welcome to Create and Destroy. I'm your host, Dan Donnarumma, and this is episode number 16. As always, I'm freaking excited about my guests. So today I have Alex Jones and Joel Thompson of the Rochester band Druse. If you've never heard Druse before, they're a melodic hardcore band. I definitely hear Killing the Dream, maybe some Touche Amore influences, but overall, super solid band. I've gotten to see them play several times over the last couple of years, and most recently I got to see them play with Birds in Row and Ken Mode, which overall was just such a solid freaking show. That was definitely one of my favorite times I've gotten to see them play. Probably the other time that I saw them play that is up there for me is when they played with Planning for Burial. It was like a year ago, probably January or February, and their set was freaking awesome. Alex, Joel, and I talked about Druse's most recent LP, Honey from the Rock, which came out in July of this year, and it is such a solid album. It's a loose concept album, and from start to finish, it really is a great album. The song, The Alphabet, is so goddamn good, and the last part of that song just freaking rips. It's so awesome. So we talked about that release. We also talked about Rochester, and we also talked about a couple other kind of funny things. So let's get right into it. Here's my conversation with Alex and Joel. All right, guys. Joel, Alex, how you doing tonight?
Very well. How are you?
Doing great.
Before we get into talking about your latest release, Honey from the Rock, and the band, I got to see you guys play here in Rochester a few weeks ago with Birds in Row and Ken Mode. How did you guys think that show went?
I thought the show went really well. I liked that it was sort of a mixed bill with Ken Mode and Sulaco being way more heavy and aggressive than Birds in a Row and Druse, but the crowd seemed to be very responsive and supportive of all the bands all night, which was like really cool. I was a little bit worried going in because obviously, like, you know, it's like I knew the people, if there was people who were coming for Birds in a Row that haven't heard us, were at least, you know, in the same wheelhouse, but with like, you know, Ken Mode being the headliner and Sulaco bringing out the Rochester crowd that follows that band, it's like, you know, that's like more of a metal crowd, but it was awesome.
I thought it was great. I love all the bands that played. We've played with Birds in a Row a handful of times now. This was like a third time playing with them. Ken Mode is awesome. I saw them in New York. It was probably like 4 or 5 years ago now. And they were awesome then, and they were great now. Sulaco was just legendary. I love that band, and it was awesome finally playing with them.
That was the first time I've gotten to see Birds in Row and Ken Mode, and both bands were so freaking awesome. Ken Mode was super fucking intense.
They're so good.
Yeah.
I like the entire month leading up to the show, I kept seeing Instagram posts about how they were playing with 2 basses for a lot of their set, and like, I was just counting down the days. I was like, I'm gonna get to see the 2 bass thing. Like, I'm so bummed.
Yeah, the dude Jesse Matheson at some point pulled out a bass and started playing. I was like, oh shit. Yeah.
That band is very intense.
Yeah, I really liked the drummer used like a sample pad, which, knowing that Ken Mode is a good band, I wasn't worried when I saw it, but a lot of times when you see a band set up the sample pad, you're like, oh boy.
I didn't even catch that.
Anytime there was like the weird vocal samples, that was him, and then there was like the crazy, like whether it was like a clarinet or oboe or whatever, so it was sitting over underneath his China cymbal. It was like he would hit it and it would just play whatever program sample he had. But yeah, like the crazy like horn parts, I guess, were the prominent things where it was like,
oh shit, I didn't even catch that. I thought that they just had someone in the back hit playing. Like, I didn't even realize that that's how they were doing it.
Yeah, the drummer controlled that, which is nuts.
That's awesome. So to delve into the band, when did you guys start playing, and when did you start taking things more seriously as a band?
I'd say about 5 years ago. I had met Joe through our mutual friend Jared, and Joe and I had like kind of been jamming on some stuff that was more emo, like late 90s emo, twinkly stuff. And then he went away on a tour, and then he came back, and our mutual friend Jared is someone that I grew up with. And I had been talking to Jared about doing a band where I was going to record drums, Joe was going to record guitar, Jared was going to record bass, I was going to do vocals, and then we were going to find a drummer, and I was going to be the vocalist. At our first practice, Alex showed up to do vocals. which was perfect because like being a singer is like an idea I like in my brain until like until it comes time to actually do something. I'm like, yeah, I'll just stick behind the drums. So then we had like a few practices with Jared, and he was playing in another band at the time, and we just could not get together. So we decided the chemistry between Joe, Alex, and I was like really good. And I had played with Alex in a band before, but it was like, we want to do this, and we don't want it to be a thing where like we got to wait. So we're just gonna go for it.
I mean, I had just come off being in a grindcore band called Controlled by Fear, and when that ended, that was like super stressful. I mean, the band was fun, but just like I sort of exited in a very weird and messy way. At that point, I was definitely like, yeah, I'm done singing for bands. Like, this is just stressful. And then within probably 2 weeks of leaving, I decided I wanted to sing in bands again. So I hit Jared up because I know he was jamming with people, and then he brought me into the space, and that's where I saw Joel for the first time in like 3 years. And yeah, and then we just started jamming, and I thought we had written the song pretty early on, and I think it was like the first song we ever wrote, and it sounded a lot like Coliseum, and that was sort of what I thought the band was going to be, so I was trying to psych myself up to do some more like rock and roll-y type vocals, but then the very next thing we wrote was much more in line with like what we sound like now, and I started to get a little bit more comfortable, and yeah, it just went from there.
Yeah, when you guys were first starting out, what type of sound were you looking to capture in your songs?
When Joe and I first, like I said, when we first started jamming, it was kind of, I was playing in a different emo band that was based out of Nashville, but we kind of were in that realm of music. And then, like I said, he left for a couple months, and then he came back, and then he had worked on a riff, like he said, it was like more aggressive, almost like earlier Coliseum. It was like a little bit more rock and rolly, but it's not like, you know, not Kiss rock and roll. And I've been into screamo for a long time, and at that point, like, I was just kind of more, I wanted to play stuff a little bit more technical. And then Joe was like, also kind of in the same mindset. He was like, he was into some more bands that were way more technical and a little bit more spastic. So it just kind of like, almost without conversation, just kind of evolved into that. And then it was just like one of those weird moments where I was like, hey, that's exactly what I want to do right now. And he's like, yeah, me too. And I was like, well, here we are.
I definitely, like, I always loved those bands, like late 90s, early 2000s screamo bands and stuff, but I just didn't even realize it was a possibility to start a band like that around here. And then, well, I mean, like I said, when I first linked up with Joe and Joel, I was sort of, I think it was a mix between like the first song that we wrote and Jared hyping up the band to me. I thought it was going to be more of like a rock and rolly, like Coliseum type thing. And I was like, okay, and I was down for that. But then we started writing a little bit more, and I was like, oh, this is like right in my wheelhouse. Like I was getting very secretly pumped about it and just hoping I didn't blow it.
So was it you guys started playing and the sound of the band started to just organically come to be, and you weren't really, I don't want to say aiming for a specific type of sound, but it just sort of happened?
I definitely say it just happened. I mean, I don't think we've ever sat down as a band and been like, we should write a song that sounds like X, or we should do an album that sounds like Y. I think that we just try to write songs that sound good to us, and we just try to be a band that we would like listening to.
We all have a lot of interests that are the same, we cross over in, but then like we all have like our own interests that are like way out there from each other. It was like one of those things where it just like, it was super organic, it just like happened, and it was like nice, because I always try to approach any musical project like that where it's like, you know, even if you have like the discussion like whether you want to be like a hardcore band or whatever, you generally have like an idea, like whether it's a more, you know, metal hardcore band or a dark hardcore band or whatever, you know, but like I try to not go into it like this is a band I want to sound like, but more of like this is a style I'm shooting for. But then in this case, it just kind of like we were just kind of jamming, and then all of a sudden it kind of morphed into what I wanted to do. But like I don't play guitar, so it's not like I like brought riffs to the table, you know. It just naturally like switched from what it was to what it is now.
On top of that, I think we started getting comfortable, or at least I started getting comfortable calling the band like a screamo-ish or like screamo adjacent band when like I first started listening to my own vocals, because when I was doing Controlled by Fear, everything was much more like Napalm Deathy, like grindcore based, so it was all very low. And I just assumed that's how my vocals sounded. But then when I started like screaming in Druse, everything was coming out like pterodactyl screeches, and I was like, whoa, I guess I have really high vocals. Like I didn't know that. And so then when people started asking me like what our new band was, I was like, oh, it's a screamo band. Like we're a screamo band. I think when that clicked, I was like, oh, like I guess we play screamo music. And then I started feeling a little bit more comfortable like going down avenues that we weren't really before.
How did you guys come up with the name Druse?
We come up with like a handful of names. But it's like anybody who's ever been in a band will know, you get an idea, you think it's original or no one's got it, and then you type it into Google and you find there's 67 bands with that band name. So we kind of we're at a loss. We wanted to record and we wanted to start playing out, but it's obviously you can have 50 songs written, but without a name, you're not going to get on the show. And one night we were just I was actually in a movie, our band group thread was going crazy. I think when I got out I had 250 messages. Joe had pitched the name Druse. I had no idea what it was, and I thought it sounded cool and it was weird, and I was well, I pretty much guarantee there's not going to be another band named Druse. And then he told us that it was the last name of the last person in the state of New York to be hanged for a crime. And I was well, I like it.
Do you know what year that took place?
No, I have no idea. It wasn't that recent.
Obviously.
Yeah, no, 2016. No, I have no idea. It was probably sometime in the... I'm just going to take a shot in the dark here. I'm going to say the 1940s.
And now, when I was preparing for this interview, I had seen that Druse has something to do with rocks, and then religion, a sect of Judaism or something along those lines. And so Honey from the Rock seems to deal with a lot of religious themes. And my thought is, they must have gotten this name from this religious word or religious sect, whatever the hell it is.
Yeah, I wish we could take credit for that. I wish we had thought that far in advance, but no, I think Joe just presented this cool, weird fact about New York State, and it just seemed perfect because it's where we're from, and it's also kind of gruesome and mysterious, and we liked the way it clicked. And then I think the religious sect aspect of it, I was completely unaware of until over a year and a half into our band. I think I Googled it once, just our name, to see what came up, and I was oh wow, this is crazy. I hope we don't get in trouble for using this name.
Yeah, my assumption was, all right, I highly doubt they named their band after some freickin' rock. So my thought was it had to do with religion.
We're big crystal heads.
Yeah, we're definitely, that's our band's number one pastime.
To go back to what you were mentioning, Alex, about singing in your vocals, when I listen to Druse, I definitely hear Killing the Dream, their vocalist. Nice. Elijah Horner's. And I definitely hear Killing the Dream just in general in Honey from the Rock. Who are some singers that has inspired you in your singing in the vocals that you use in your music?
Let's see. I mean, I love Killing the Dream. That band is awesome. I definitely listened to them a lot when they were around. I think actively though, people that I've seen perform in person that I just love their music and I admire their stage presence. I mean, the first person that comes to mind is Rory Van Grohl. When I was in my most probably impressionable phase and I was seeing a lot of his bands, he had a huge impact on the way that I approached screaming and stage presence and stuff like that. Because he wasn't just a front man. He wasn't just standing there and motionless, but he also wasn't doing all of the super stereotypical hardcore guy moves. There was a very organic and natural way that he moved around the stage and expressed himself. And I mean, he has such a range too, his vocals and How We Are and a little bit in Soul Control are definitely a little bit more higher and hardcore-y, but then you get to a band like Achilles and he's going so deep on those songs, and he never sounds weak or forced. There are some dudes who do the hardcore or metal style of deeper vocals, and it's just so YouTube, they're just sitting in their rooms practicing their inhales for 2 hours, and he's always sounded like himself. You listen to a Rory Van Grohl song and you're oh, that's Rory, within half a second of hearing him. And yeah, I think when I was 15, I just watching him play, I was damn, this guy is so cool. And I hope that he listens to this because that would be very embarrassing. but yeah, he's definitely number one. I mean, and then there's so many other front people in various bands that I just hear along the way that I just really admire the way that they approach singing or their stage presence or both, that I feel I subconsciously take notes about, and I'm just trying to emulate them and add my own personal thing to it when I'm doing stuff in Druse.
Aside from Rory and him, at least to some degree, shaping how, your vocals. How has Rochester shaped you guys as musicians?
Before that, I just remember two other people. Cedric from At the Drive-In is a massive influence on me, and Mark Paffey from Bear vs. Shark. Those two people are right on par with Rory as being like the most important from people in my life.
So I grew up about an hour and a half south of here in like the middle of nowhere. And the southern tier is just like, I grew up in a town with no store, like no stoplights. Like it's like literally like, I think the strip of like town was like under a mile. And I had met some guys from Rochester, probably in my teenage years, like at a county fair a little bit south of here. I would see him in the summer times. I used to work with my father. He had like a business that would set up and sell stuff at these like events. So I would see him like in the summertime, and like I'd make my little friends at all these places. But I ran into one of these guys 2009 maybe, and I was in Buffalo at a hardcore show, and I ran into him, and I just started talking, and he knew I was like a drummer, and then he asked me if I wanted to start a band with him, which I did. It was awesome for me because I was like just looking for a way to get out of my hometown, and like I didn't know anybody anywhere like really, so I didn't want to or well enough to like justify moving somewhere, And then with Rochester it was great because I started playing in the band, and then we were playing shows up here, so I like got to meet a bunch of people up here and see like a lot of awesome bands, and we played a show with Achilles. It was just like mind-blowing because I had never seen a band like that. It was just cool to be able to be a part of the scene that was like with this band, and for me it was like Rochester was like my escape from the place I hated the most in my life, and I was like and now it's like I don't really have any ties to where I grew up, so it's like my whole like adult life and like anybody I consider close to or like a friend or anything is like Rochester. So it's like I've got nothing but love for Rochester. It's allowed me to live, I guess, probably my best life and meet like my best friends and like make the music I want to make. And it's like, so for me, I get very like, I'm very happy about Rochester, like the scene here, just being here. Like I know that I can speak for probably most of us. We have like a huge sense of pride for Rochester and being like a Rochester band. And like, I don't know, it's just like, in my opinion, it's a pretty fantastic place.
Yeah. I moved to Rochester probably right around the same time that you had moved here. I would come up to Rochester. My ex-girlfriend was living here at the time, and I would come up and I'd visit. And for a smaller city, I was always impressed by the art scene in Rochester and the music scene. And I agree with you. I think even though I'm a transplant here, I do have a good sense of pride in this city. And it really is, for the size of it, it is an awesome place to live.
Where are you from?
I'm originally from downstate. So before moving to Rochester, I was living in Long Island.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
I saw your area code earlier, and you have the same area code as my friend Chris, who's also from Long Island. So that's very cool.
Yeah, Long Island is cool because it's super close to New York City, but I do not miss living in Long Island whatsoever. No, yeah.
I grew up not close to Long Island, but I grew up downstate. I was born in Tarrytown, and then I lived in Scarsdale until I was about 13, and then I moved up here. So, and I do not miss that area at all. Yeah. Those are like the most stressful times of my life. I mean, I was also like, 11, 12, 13 when I was living there. So those are like the worst years of your life. So, but yeah, I love being here now.
I was, around that time I was dating, a girl who was going to UB, and like there was a brief moment of time where I thought I was moving to Buffalo, and I was like really dreading it because so obviously I grew up in the middle of nowhere, so to go to any sort of show, like it was an hour and a half, 2 hours driving. I was not a fan of Buffalo because for some reason it seems like no matter where you are in Buffalo, you're 25 minutes from where you need to be. So it's like if you're here and you're like, oh, let's go to this restaurant or this food, you like look and you're like, how am I a half hour from everything?
No matter what, you always end up on the highway. Like
you got to pay a toll to go literally everywhere in Buffalo. But obviously, like I said, when I like started being in bands up here and meeting the people up here, like what you said, it's like I like that it's a small city. Like it's a city. I can drive 20 minutes and kind of be back in the wilderness, or I can just like. The amount of culture that's here is just insane. We've got great bands. We've got great bands that people know about all over the country. Like you said, for a small city, there's like so much good, positive stuff happening and going on. It's kind of unbelievable for the size of the city versus like what comes out of here.
Yeah, I completely agree. If someone from out of town were coming to visit you in Rochester, what's one of the things you're telling them they have to do or see?
I guess it depends what they're into. I mean, I work part-time at a record store called Needle Drop, and It's the best record store in the city. I say that proudly and confidently, and I would recommend they come visit me there because even if I'm not working, I guess, just visit the store because it's awesome. And it has the most curated and most well thought out selection of like any music store around here. Obviously there's like the big landmark sites, like go to the George Eastman Museum. There's always cool stuff happening there. Strong museum of play, especially if you have kids. Even if you don't, I mean, it's just fun being there. There's always really cool shit happening there. Tons of great bars and restaurants, and yeah, I mean, there's just a million things I could suggest.
My two go-tos are generally the cemetery, Mount Home Cemetery, because it's like, I think one of the biggest in the country. Been on a few TV shows for like hauntings and stuff if you're into that stuff. And then like the subway is also like, the abandoned subway is also crazy because you go down there and it's just, it's nuts. You don't normally see stuff like that. So generally those are like, if there's someone here from out of town, like we do like the record stores if they're into that, go to like the restaurants that we like, and then I'm always like, hey, you guys want to go to the cemetery or the subway? And usually everybody's like super pumped about it because it's like, like Mount Hope is just like, it's so big, and like Frederick Douglass is buried there and stuff, and Susan B. Anthony, so it's like there's some relevance in history again, out of the good stuff coming out of Rochester. We've got some like pretty heavy hitters buried here.
Every 2 years whenever there's elections, I feel like BuzzFeed is always putting, the Susan B. Anthony.
Always.
It's like, there's Rochester.
It's that the like social media claims to fame for Rochester are that, and every 6 months one of those like Now This or like Al Jazeera Plus type Facebook websites will post a thing that's like, this Western New York City has a dish called the garbage plate.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
People actually eat this?
So I have to say, like, when I first moved up here, I was enamored with Garbage Plates. I thought they were the most amazing thing ever. And then when my friends would come and visit me, are like, we got to have garbage plates. And now I am like so grossed out by garbage plates. Whenever someone suggested to me, like, oh, that's so fucking gross.
I wish I had that kind of discipline, because I definitely am grossed out by them. But I think I'm just such a trash person that I'll still eat them all the time. And on the topic of places to go in Rochester, whenever there's people visiting me from out of town, they always want to go to Dogtown, and it's just something they've heard about. Like, I heard Dogtown, they have like a million types of hot dogs, and they do like veggie dogs and everything. Like, can we please go there? Which I'm fine with, because I love that place. But I think like I would not have expected that to be like the number one touristy thing that people from outside of Rochester want to go to, but it always is.
My wife is the front end manager of Dogtown, which is funny because like she's worked there for 8 years, I think, or something like that. And so she like, people always assume that we eat there all the time, but like we like never eat there.
She was working there when I met you.
That's true. I'm pretty not into my food being all like slammed together, and I really don't like onions, so it's like the garbage plates are really.
You're tripping, man. Onions are the shit.
I do. I've tried 1,000 times.
We've had this conversation so many times.
A nice Dogtown story. My old band played Fest, and the bass player and I are from Rochester. The other guys were from Nashville, and our bass player was wearing a Dogtown shirt. One of the members of the band, The World Is a Beautiful Place, like walked by and like stopped dead in his tracks and was like, "Hey, Dogtown!" And we like both looked. He's like, "That's the best fucking place on earth." And then like a couple of years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, they did a tour.
Yep.
It was like based on restaurants they like, which I thought was awesome. Like, I'm not laughing because it's funny. I'm laughing because it's like a genius idea. Like,
this is why anyone goes on tour.
And they, through Tim Avery, they contacted Dogtown to get like a daily special that was like their hot dog, and it was just funny because it's like, I've been here long enough where like like you said, like the like allure of a garbage plate is completely gone. Like I don't like, I might eat a plate like twice a year, and that's being generous. And yeah, it was just funny because they like, that guy was so pumped about that shirt, like, and then like he saw us a few more times in the show and was just like, Dogtown, like across the room.
That place is pretty goddamn. I ate there for the first time recently in probably like 3 or 4 years. I was wearing a Champion shirt, and some dude that was cooking behind in the kitchen just kind of like poked his head. I was like, "Yo, are you wearing a Champion shirt?" "Yeah." "Awesome band, man." And then just went back to cooking.
What did he look like?
Kind of a shorter dude.
Was he wearing a beanie?
No. Short hair.
Or was he wearing an Integrity hat?
I think he was wearing an Integrity hat.
That's Jared.
Yeah. Oh, okay, yep. He complimented me on my Champion
I think
shirt.
he actually said that to me. He's like my little brother. I grew up with him, and I've basically been kind of like his brother / father figure for the past like 15 years. So It's just funny. I think he did say that. He's like, yeah, this guy came in wearing a championship.
I have a very opposite Dogtown band t-shirt story. When I was very young, I was probably like 15 or 16. I went there, and this guy came out of the kitchen wearing Another Breath shirt, and it was not Jared. It was somebody who I don't think works there anymore. And I was like, oh, cool shirt, man. And he dropped my tray on the table and went, thanks. And then went back into the kitchen. That was very bummed.
Do you know Eric Sainer?
No.
He was actually the original singer of Mastodon, and it could have been him. Oh, no.
So now to delve into your releases, you guys released Honey from the Rock this July of this year. Yes. And prior to that, you released 2 EPs, The Way We Ache in 2016 and Target Weight in 2014. Creatively, how do your previous EPs that you've released compare to Honey from the Rock?
Obviously, like any sort of endeavor you do in life, like Target Weight, we were very fresh to each other. Life was absolutely bonkers. Alex was in college. I was in, I think, only one other band. I was in the band I've referenced a few times that was based out of Nashville. Joe was filling in with Such Gold, and then he also filled in for this band called The Sheds for like a couple months tour in that period of time. So we like I knew Alex very well because we played in a band many years ago together, and we instantly clicked and grew very close during that time. So I had pretty good chemistry with Alex. I was still like pretty fresh to Joe, but we got along great. And then we ended up writing Target Weight, the three of us. And then we added our first bass player, Kevin, who I was in a band with previous, and I had met through shows. He was from Buffalo. He went to college in Brockport. So I ran into him in Buffalo, ran into him in Rochester. And then, I mean, he obviously wrote his own parts for that, but he wasn't really there. Like I sent him the 5 like skeletons we had. And then with Target Weight, with The Way That We Ache, we were a couple of years into being a band, and like kind of settled into who we were at that time. It was definitely more relaxed because we were able to write as a full band versus like the three of us like waiting on a 4th member or waiting on Kevin to join the band and play bass or whatever. We switched bass players to our current bass player Ryan, who is like just like he really brings out the best in you musically and like as a person. He's just such a good person to be around. He's such a positive force. But he's a crazy guitar player, crazy bass player. He just like really is a musical guy. Like he's the guy that figures out all of our timing. It's like Joe will write a riff or I'll throw a beat out there, and I can't speak for Joe, but for myself, I have no idea. When it comes to time signatures, I'm just like, this is the beat I'm playing, like wherever the one lands is where it is. But Ryan's always the guy that just kind of like, he has he has something I really respect. So does Joe, where they're both very like gear heavy guys. As like anybody who's seen our band, like generally the 2 things they say are like, band was incredibly loud and their guitar player has got 4,000 pedals. But they have the balance that I appreciate, and I would say I view myself in this same way too, where like I try to be as knowledgeable as I can about my equipment or the equipment I like, but also not be so focused on the like gear side of things that I forget about being a musician, where we all kind of we can talk gear all day, but we play in an organic way where it's not as like robotic as a lot of guys, like a lot of like YouTube guitar pedal guys, like they can shred, they can play guitar, and they can tell you every piece of wiring in this pedal, but then like you go to jam with some of those guys and it's just like just set up the camera and do the reviews, man. Like it's not working. But so for writing Honey from the Rock, it was like we kind of had reached like maximum comfort level with each other because we had like done a little bit of touring here and there, and everybody in the band just gets along really well. So it's like I don't ever feel like it's a chore to go to practice. I don't ever feel like it's a chore to do anything. Like I genuinely love everybody in the band, and like there's no expectations in terms of like writing or anything. It just kind of, it's all usually generally pretty organic, and it's just like with Ryan being in the band now, like he's just got 10,000 ideas all the time. So it's like Joe will bring something and Ryan is like can instantly like rebound off of it and have suggestions for that riff, a follow-up for the riff, and it just kind of, now everything just like it's just super smooth and super comfortable.
And to delve into Honey from the Rock, can you talk about the title of the album and the significance of it in terms of themes or ideas that you focus on in the album?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I know that Honey from the Rock as a phrase comes from the Bible, but where I got it from it's the title of a book about Kabbalah and sort of like metaphysical Judaism and stuff like that, mostly Kabbalah. It was a subject matter that I was getting kind of passively into right before we started writing the record. And I had grown up Jewish, my mother is Jewish. I went to temple for like 3 years and then I stopped going. So I didn't really I had the heritage aspect of it, but I never really had too deep of an understanding of what that heritage meant or what any of those teachings meant. And I was fine with that for a long time, but right before we started writing the record, I just started getting very curious about it. And I just wanted to know the history of my culture and my heritage. And I wanted to understand what all those things meant. And it was just this whole avenue of things that I just hadn't even bothered exploring. And I brought this up with my girlfriend's father probably the Thanksgiving before we started writing the record, because I think he's Sephardic. He's a Sephardic Jew, and he is very into that stuff. I didn't expect him to kind of get excited about it, but I feel like I subconsciously knew that he was going to steer me down the right path. And so I brought it up and I was like, yeah, I've really been kind of getting into this stuff. Is there anything you can tell me about it? And we ended up talking about it for days and days. The entire time that I was down there visiting, we just had these long, really beneficial, fruitful conversations about it. And when I was leaving, he was like, I'm going to send you a book that I think you're really going to enjoy. And I was like, all right, great, please do. And then I think 2 or 3 weeks went by, and then this book just showed up on my doorstep, and it was Honey from the Rock by, I think his name is Lawrence Kushner. I poured into it. I thought it was amazing. And it wasn't even in this aspect where I picked up the book and I was like, all of these things are true, and I'm now a devout follower of Kabbalah. I was just like, no, these are just incredible concepts, and this is just a really remarkable way to think about people and to think about the world. And there were aspects of it that I really didn't agree with, and there were aspects of it that I thought were just incredibly profound. This came at a time, the book reaching me came at a time where we were starting to get songs done that needed lyrics, and everything on Target Weight and The Way That We Ache is very gut-wrenching and personal, and it's all this bloodletting, and I just didn't really want to do that anymore. And I kind of wanted to steer myself in a bit more of a positive direction, I guess. And this was the perfect avenue for me to do that, because not only was I able to broach subject matters that I hadn't really done at all before, whether musically or in my life, but I was able to talk about myself and my experiences in a way that was positive and that was uplifting. Yeah, so I just, when we were coming up with the title for the record, I was like, well, 80% of the lyrics on this thing are based around ideas and concepts that I got from this book. I'm just going to name it after the book and share a title with it, because out of respect and out of just admiration for all the things that this thing has given me in my life.
And how did the rest of the band feel about that? Was there any dissension, or was everyone on board with that?
I don't think there was any dissension at all. I mean, I think the thing that I kept stressing to everybody, and I remember I had sent a handful of frantic 3 a.m. texts where I was like, yo, I'm about to send you some lyrics, and there's some God stuff in there, but these are not religious lyrics. We're not turning into Under Oath. This is we're not a God band. This is not a religious album. It's just an album that has a lot to do with religion. I think everybody understood that, and everybody was very cool throughout the entire process.
As soon as he sent the title, I was I had no idea what it meant, but I really liked it, because there's just something about the phrase where I was just I don't know what it is, but it's really hitting home for me, and I just felt it felt pretty heavy. He's not exaggerating. He sent some pretty psychopathic messages tied in with some of the themes. And for me, I like everybody to be able to do whatever they want to do with this band. If I didn't have full confidence in Alex as a vocalist and a lyricist, I wouldn't be in a band with him. So when he was this is where I'm at, this is what I'm diving into, this is what's meaningful to me, I was automatically on board. And I mean, obviously, I like everything, otherwise I wouldn't be a part of it. But I'll never, he sent me when he sent the title in the group message, it was for me, it was an instant, I think my response was, that's it. Instantly, I was this is what I think this should be called.
I kept going back into the book and trying to take passages from it that I could potentially maneuver into a title. And then after a while, I was just I'm just going to name it after the book, because that's what this album is really about. And the thing that I really I'd stress to Joel and everybody in the band, but also anybody that asked me about it, it's it's not, and I said this before, but it's not a religious album. It's not supposed to be an advertisement for Judaism or Kabbalah. It's just an album that is very interested in exploring those themes and what it means to be Jewish and what it means to respect a culture and a heritage and not necessarily try to preach it to people or shove it down people's throats. It's personal by the way of something bigger than yourself. I think it's probably the best way to describe it.
Yeah, the song The Alphabet, which is the same name of a poem by Carl Shapiro, is an example of Jewish mysticism influencing the writing on the album. Can you talk about that song and what the impetus was in writing that song and maybe the thought and meaning behind the lyrics?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a little confusing, but there's a song on the record called Yom Kippur. The song The Alphabet was the one that was directly inspired by my experiences on Yom Kippur the previous year that I wrote it. It's about, I guess, sacrifice, and it's about just trying to immerse yourself in a culture that you've been sort of not circumventing, but you've been on the periphery of your whole life, even though you know that you're a part of it, whether you want to be or not. And it's about trying to grapple with those themes and see where your place is in the whole like cognitive system of being a Jewish person, because there's this pull sometimes where, I mean, a lot of people who are Jewish who grew up in houses where like, you didn't go to temple every week or you didn't have a bar mitzvah. There's this expression that a lot of Jewish people throw around with, like, oh, I'm a bad Jew, like I eat pork, I'm a bad Jew, like, oh, I don't celebrate Hanukkah, I'm a bad Jew, whatever. And that was the thing that I did all the time. And I know it's self-deprecating and I know it's just you're poking fun at yourself, but I sort of got to a point where I was like, I'm not a bad Jew, I'm just Jewish. Like, I can't help it. Like, I am, like, it is who I am. And I was born Jewish and I'm going to die Jewish. And this is just the person that I know. And that song, The Alphabet, is just about really diving into those things and letting yourself be like immersed in this culture for what feels like the first time. And then the title, I mean, The Alphabet, yeah, it's a poem by Carl Shapiro. And that was like the most last minute addition to it. I think I came up with that when we were recording the album. I think that song got a title in the studio because it was the only one that didn't have a title. And I was reading a lot of Carl Shapiro at the time, and I just read that poem. And it talks about like all things being rolled back into the book of days. I think it's like the last line. I was like, damn, that is so cool. And that like is eerily similar to like what I'm trying to get across on this song. So I think it's just the same thing with Honey from the Rock, where I was just like not creative enough to come up with my own title. And I was like, I'm just going to borrow his. Like, it's just a perfect encapsulation of what I'm trying to talk about. So I'll just name it the same thing to honor him.
That song is so awesome. I love the last like minute of that song.
Thank you.
Yeah, that song is rad as hell.
Yeah, that's like our snapcase part, I think is what we call it.
That is maybe my favorite song on the album. For me, it has like so much going on and so many, like, it's got really soft parts, it's got really crazy parts, it's got heavy parts. Like when we were writing that, I was able to do, with the help of our engineer John, I did all the weird noises in the intro. I have like in an old job, I found this like fire alarm bell, and like I smacked that, and then he took that and like reversed it, and then he had like this box of weird like little kid percussion trinkets. And then like I do like it's not a xylophone, I don't know what it is, but it's just like little kids like ding 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 ding.
I'm picturing those like Fisher Price like little like xylophones.
It was Melissa and Doug. But yeah, it was for me that song, and then obviously like in my opinion like the star of that song is like the guitar at the end, and because the bass and the guitar do that crazy loop where it just sounds like a computer is like glitching out. For me, like it might be my favorite song on the record.
Yeah, it's a solid song, and especially to see you guys perform it too. That song is pretty rad. And I read that Annalisa is about the strength and persistence of Jewish love in an era where anti-Semitism and Nazism are becoming new normals. Yeah. So what goes through your mind when you're seeing, reading, hearing about the shit that continues to happen in this country, especially in the wake of the shootings in Pittsburgh? You know, what kind of goes through your mind when you're seeing this sort of stuff continue to happen in America?
Oh, nothing constructive. I mean, at least at first, it's just a lot of grief. It's a lot of pain. It's a lot of not understanding what to say and how to say it. I still struggle with that. I mean, when the Pittsburgh shooting happened, I was at a complete loss for words for like 2 days. I didn't know how to express what I was feeling, and I didn't know whether or not I should say anything at all. You know, you kind of reach this point where you feel like you have to add your voice to the fray because you feel like you should. I think that ultimately a lot of the struggles that I've had with learning how to talk about these things has been learning how to process how I feel internally, because I think that it's very hard to reconcile what to say to people who are grieving and what to say to yourself when you don't know what to say. And I think that with a song like Annalisa, that's just sort of me trying to remind myself that these horrible things happen and will continue to happen unless something changes on like an intrinsic level. And all we can do besides, opposing oppression where we see it and tearing down establishments and institutions that are actively, bolstering white supremacy and anti-Semitism is just to make sure that we're looking out for each other on a person-to-person basis. Because activism and protest is a monumentally important thing, and I think people should continue to do that for as long as it takes, getting out into the streets and actually making an active physical change in the world. But if you're not looking after the people who are in your direct vicinity and you're not making sure that your friends and your loved ones are okay, then you're sort of skipping a step, and you're not building your movement and your ideas on a solid foundation. And everyone says, like, if when we have each other, we have everything. I think that's sort of like the root message of that song. It's just whether you're Jewish or not, just making sure that the people in your life are solid.
Nice. And Last Days of the Syracuse, New York Astral Projection Cult.
Yeah, that's a weird one.
Is another song that I really like.
It has nothing to do with Judaism.
So I'm a huge Star Wars fan, and I love The Last Jedi. And whenever I listen to that song, it totally makes me think of Luke Skywalker. I'm assuming that song has absolutely nothing to do with
Dude, I don't know what
Luke
that song's
Skywalker.
about. I'll be honest with you. I love sci-fi, and I love like the Twilight Zone and those little like disturbing encapsulations of like the human psyche. And it literally just stemmed from, I was driving, I think Druse had just played a show in Syracuse, and we were driving home, and I was like looking out the window, and I was like, man, like this place is depressing. And that's like, this is like just the dilapidated like Rust Belt concrete, and then the woods everywhere. I was just like, this would be like the perfect place for some bizarre science fiction event to happen. And then I think I just went home and wrote that song about just a woman who joins an astral projection cult and ends up like murdering all of them. Is I think what that song is about, but I still don't really know.
A little interesting Easter egg for anybody out there. So a friend of ours put out our first 2 EPs on an LP for us, and Alex's lovely girlfriend drew us the cover for our release variant, and it is like a tarot style drawing of Carrie Fisher.
That's awesome.
Anybody who has that probably had no idea, but when you hear that, you'll instantly see it.
And to go back to Rory, he's on that song.
He is.
And how did you guys make that happen?
I think we just asked him, right? And he said he was down, and then he recorded the vocals separately.
Joe also works at Ugly Duck, so it was pretty. I mean, he liked our band prior to Joe working there, but it was very easy because I think he just like rolled into work and was like, "Hey, do you want to be on our record?" And he was like, "Absolutely."
I was beyond pumped to have that happen. I mean, I profess my love for everything he's been involved with earlier, so just the fact that he's on our record is so huge for me.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. And would you say that Honey from the Rock is a concept album?
I think it's a very loose concept record. I think that it definitely has like a narrative and there are characters involved, but I think if you want to look at it as a concept record, there is a structure there. But I think if you want to just interpret it your own way, it's very much open to that too. You know, when we started writing stuff for it, I think I was talking to Joel about it. I was like, this is going to be like an act by act thing, and there's going to be like a cast of characters and like spoken word interludes. And then I actually like got down to writing it, and I was like, I don't want to do any of this. like, this is way too hard. So I was like, what if it's just about 2 characters, but it's also about like things that don't have to fit into this rigid narrative structure? And that's kind of where it all ended up being.
How long did you guys work on creating the songs for Honey from the Rock?
It was a pretty good chunk of time.
It was.
We obviously had the switch from Kevin to Ryan, and we were just kind of like rolling out with what we were doing. And then it was just like, we knew it was time to write, and we started writing. And then it was like almost every aspect of life, when you have your mind set on like, this is what we're doing. You know, we had like 10 shows pop up that like, even though we said we weren't going to play shows because we were writing, they were just shows that we like had to play. Like, so I was like, well, I guess we gotta play. We gotta play. But we ended up taking like, I think 2 months where we like, it was just like every practice was like 3 to 4 hours of just like heavy writing. And we have a massive marker board, and we just sectioned off like all the slots we needed for the songs, and we like, split it off into sections for guitar, bass, vocals, like extra stuff. And it was just like, we would we'd pick like, say, all right, well, these are the 3 songs we want to work on this practice, or like we'd try, and then obviously like, if you get there, like sometimes certain songs just aren't working that day, so we would move on to whatever else. But it was like, I don't know, like 3 to 6 months, I would say. We just kind of really like, if not more.
I'd say at least 6, because we were writing like right up to recording, I'm pretty sure.
Did your EPs take that long to write as well, or no?
I don't think so.
EP1 took about
4 months, maybe.
That's
2.
Well, no, it took about I don't know, like, yeah, I would say 2 months for the 3 of us to hammer out the 5 songs, and then I waited a month for Kevin to move to Rochester or to Rockport, and then it was like we pretty much almost instantly recorded when he was available. And then the Way That We Ache was a little bit longer, but the same thing. It was like we probably had 2 of those songs written, like where Joe had like 85% of a couple songs done, and then it was like, all right, let's do this. And then we just like probably over 3 months hammered that out, and then had a couple shows where we just kind of showed up and just played the whole thing start to finish, like, and then we were like, all right, it's time to record.
Yep. The Way That We Ache especially, I remember coming together very, very fast.
Do you guys have a favorite song of yours that you like to play live?
Right now, for me, it's either Echinacea off of Honey from the Rock, or The Alphabet off Honey from the Rock.
Let's see. Mine is Annalisa is a really fun one for me.
I love that one too.
And The Alphabet is another one that I really love. And I would say those 2 are probably, like, at any point in time, my favorite song to play live.
Live Alone off Target Weight. I just love playing that song. Like, from the first time we ever played it, it's just such a fun song for me to play. And I when I see it on a set list, I'm so pumped. I'm like, oh, we get to do that one next. Like, I'm so hyped about that.
Nice. That's awesome. And what have you guys been listening to lately?
If I'm not listening to podcast,
Tell them about Doughboys.
Yeah, so Alex turned me on to a life-changing event. It's a podcast called The Doughboys. And I spent this entire summer listening to like 400 hours of Doughboys.
Holy shit, man.
So I do, I'm a drywall finisher, so I have a lot of headphone time. So it's like, it's awesome because it's like I can just, whether it's a podcast or whether it's music, I can just like dive in. Like, I work alone a lot of the times, but lately I've been really listening to a couple Morrissey records, heavy rotation. Majority Rule is pretty much, I would say, at least once a week I go through the discography.
I've been on like a huge Britpop kick recently, so lots of Blur, lots of Pulp, Charlatans, stuff like that. A little Oasis. I like Oasis a lot, but it's hard for me to like sit down and listen to them for a long time. And then if not that, I've been listening to, I'm really into like metal and death metal and stuff like that, so I've kind of been like going through the classics a lot recently. I've been listening to a lot of Entombed, Left Hand Path, the first couple Carcass records I've been really into. And then randomly, like a couple weeks ago, my friend Kyle texted me and he was like, hey, what's your favorite Morbid Angel record? And then from that moment, I've just been like, man, I should really listen to more Morbid Angel. So I've just been like cycling through the first 6 or 7 records over and over and over.
As of lately, the band Engine Down, from the late 90s, early 2000s into, I think 2005 might have been their last release. I listened to their record Demure and their self-titled record, like, I don't know, probably 20 times in the past 3 weeks. A band called Choir Boy, I listen to almost once a day, and then I listen to a lot of like 60s and 70s R&B, just like good classic pop songs that are timeless. And then, like I said before, like as of lately, it's been a lot of Morrissey, and then the band from Rochester named California Cousins.
Oh yeah,
I pretty much listened to them.
I don't know if he was around in the 60s.
Couple times.
Do you like Sam Cooke?
Yes.
Oh, I love Sam Cooke, man.
I'm really into the Four Tops, Earth, Wind, and Fire. I have like, I make these like absurdly long playlists for like anytime we travel that are essentially just either full of like 60s and 70s R&B or like just straight up classic rock, but they're like 4 to 5 hours of just hit after hit after hit. Oh, really quick, Jackson Browne has been on heavy rotation lately too.
My favorite album that's come out this year is by this artist named Tirza, and it's called Devotion. She is this very sort of quiet, like bedroom poppy, like R&B singer from the UK. And she does all of these very weird, like small little pop songs that are just very sultry and relaxing. And I've been like really getting into her discography. She has a lot of like dance singles and stuff that I've been loving. There's also a band called I think it's Trico. It's Tricot.
Tricot from Japan.
Yes, I don't know if it's Tricot or Trico though.
It's Tricot.
Somebody corrected me once.
Oh, Paul Chalos is it?
Oh, okay. Yeah, he would know. Tricot. They are amazing. They are like the super mathy, all-female Japanese rock band, and the singer just has like these fucking pipes, and she just has this incredible voice. And
unbelievable, absolutely, like 10 out of 10 band.
And I just like I get so emotional when I listen to them. Just like I'm very overwhelmed by people that can do a thing very well. Like, so when I hear like people that really know how to sing, like I'll often catch myself just like openly weeping. So like the first time I heard Tricot, I was driving and it came on like my Spotify Discover Weekly, and I was like, oh my god, like she is so good at singing. So I've been like obsessed with their discography recently, and so I'll do like 2 more. One of my all-time favorite bands is Spiritualized. At Jay Spaceman, I just like worship the ground he walks on, and I've been like really diving back into his discography. I've been listening to a lot of Laser Guided Melodies, which is their first record. I love that.
Have you gotten into the new LP?
Yes.
I have to say I tried. I gave it a bunch of tries, just like I can't enjoy it.
It's fine. You know, I think it's hard because I have such an intense personal bias with that band where like he could like mail me a box of shit and I would be like, this is genius.
It's called art.
Yeah. But yeah, I've listened to it like 3 or 4 times now, and it's definitely my least favorite, but I like it fine. But Songs in A&E I've been listening to a lot too, and I love that one. And then I guess 2 more really quick. I love hip hop. I've been listening to the Young Thug EP with Elton John on it. It's called On the Run. There's a song with Will Smith's son Jaden Smith on it. It's unbelievable. It's also very emotional for me. Just listening to Elton John and Young Thug on a song together. And then finally, there's a band from Canada called Tomb Mold. They're like very riffy, sort of like mid-tempo death metal. Sounds a lot like Entombed, like early Entombed. Awesome band. They have an album called A Manner of Infinite Forms, and it came out on 20 Buck Spin earlier this year, and it's unbelievable. It's probably my favorite metal album that came out this year.
Nice. And so, what do you guys have coming up?
A lot of writing. I think that's probably the number one priority. We're playing a show tomorrow. Our friend Jared, who we've talked about, he has a label called Sore Ear Collective, and he's doing a sort of like fest for bands that he's put out stuff for, but also just like bands that he likes. And we're doing that. It's called Destroy Rochester. And then after that, we're sort of going to go into hibernation for a little bit and try to write as much as possible.
And so after today, how can people stay up to date with what you guys are doing?
I would say Instagram and Facebook.
Yes, primarily. We have a Twitter too, but I like use that for bullshitting mostly. Like I'll just kind of I've been really trying not to, but I've been using it as a lot of like my personal stuff recently. So I'm just like, saw a nice sunset at the gas station today, and I'm like, oh, I accidentally tweeted that from the Druse account, and I'm like, I'm just gonna leave it up. But yeah, primarily Instagram and Facebook are the things that we post on the most.
Sweet, nice. Well, thanks so much, guys. I really appreciate this.
Hey, thank you.
Thanks for having us.
And there you have it, folks. That's my conversation with Alex Jones and Joel Thompson. I really enjoyed my conversation with Alex and Joel, 2 super cool guys. I really appreciate Alex talking about Honey from the Rock and what inspired him in his writing of the lyrics. I'm not a religious person whatsoever, but I can appreciate someone kind of exploring their heritage, their culture, and coming to grips with it in their own way, delving into that that writing about it and then sharing that with others. And I do really like that Honey from the Rock is somewhat of a concept album. As I told Alex and Joel, the one song, The Last Days of the Syracuse, New York Astral Projection Cult, makes me think of Luke Skywalker's Force projection in The Last Jedi. If you don't like The Last Jedi, you can get smacked up and jacked up, brah. I'll make sure to add links in the show notes to how you guys could listen to Druse, listen to Honey from the Rock, how you could follow them on social media. So make sure to do that after today. Follow, Create, and Destroy. Subscribe if you can. If you could rate the show, that would be awesome. Thank you so much to all of your support. I really appreciate it. It means a lot to me. As always, get out there, create something cool. I will see you next time.